Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now, imagine this. Jin-Woo, the Relentless, suddenly enters the Akame ga Kill universe. What happens next? Let's find out. The night over the capital is heavy, swollen with arrogance and perfume and blood. Lanterns glow across marble balconies, while screams are carefully buried beneath music. Nobles toast to prosperity while entire districts starve beyond the inner walls. This is an empire rotting from the inside, polished on the surface and diseased at the core. And in the middle of that decay, a rift opens without warning. No thunder, no explosion. Just a distortion in the air like reality itself hesitating. From that fracture steps Jin-Woo, black coat settling against his frame, eyes calm, unreadable, absorbing everything in a single sweep. He does not ask where he is. He feels it. The malice here is thick enough to taste. Compared to monarchs and dragons, the humans in this world are fragile. But their cruelty rivals anything he has seen. His senses expand outward like a silent tide. Dozens of armed guards patrol nearby streets. Hidden killers move across rooftops with disciplined precision. Farther ahead, inside a brightly lit estate, fear pulses violently from below ground level. That is where his attention locks. Inside the mansion, Noble laughs as he forces terrified villagers into a twisted game designed purely for amusement. The Empire calls this justice. The capital calls this entertainment. The underground chamber reeks of iron and panic. Just as one captive is dragged forward, the doors explode inward. A blur of blades, a flash of red eyes. Night Raid has arrived. Akame moves first, silent and lethal. Tatsumi follows, armor gleaming under torchlight. Their mission is simple. Execute the noble. Leave no witnesses who threaten the rebellion. But before Akame's sword can fall, the room grows colder. Not with ice, not with wind, but with presence. The torches flicker downward as if afraid to burn too brightly. Every assassin freezes. Every guard instinctively steps back. Jin-Woo is standing between the noble and his executioners. He did not run. He did not leap. He is simply there. His gaze passes over Night Raid without hostility, without recognition. They are not his target. The noble trembling behind him is. Tatsumi reacts first, blade raised. Akame shifts position, calculating angles, identifying this unknown as a variable. Jin-Woo does not explain himself. He extends one hand. The noble's body lifts from the ground, invisible pressure crushing the air around him. The man attempts to scream, but shadow coils around his throat like living chains. Jin-Woo's expression does not change. He has seen kingdoms fall. He has erased armies. A single corrupt aristocrat is beneath effort. The guards charge in desperation. That is when the floor fractures with darkness. From beneath Jin-Woo's feet, shadows rise and take form. Armored silhouettes with glowing eyes step into existence, blades already mid-swing. The underground chamber becomes a slaughterhouse in seconds. Night Raid watches in stunned silence as trained soldiers are dismantled effortlessly, their weapons clattering uselessly against the stone. Jin-Woo does not move from his position. He does not need to. His army fights for him. Akame narrows her eyes. This is not a Teigu. This is something else entirely. Something that does not belong to the Empire or the Revolution. And as the noble's body begins to collapse under crushing force, Jin-Woo finally speaks, his voice calm and absolute, declaring judgment not as a rebel, not as a hero, but as something far above the politics of this broken world. His voice carries no anger, no righteousness, no hesitation. He simply states that this man's life ends here. The pressure tightens, bones fracture inward, the noble's body drops lifeless to the stone floor without spectacle. No dramatic flourish, no prolonged suffering, just execution, clean, final. Silence floods the chamber. The only sound left is the fading echo of steel hitting the ground as the last Imperial Guard collapses. The shadows retract slightly but do not vanish. They stand behind Jin-Woo in disciplined stillness, awaiting the next command. Their glowing eyes scan the room like silent sentries. Tatsumi steps forward despite the weight in the air pressing against his chest. He demands to know who Jin-Woo is and what his affiliation is. Revolutionary Army, Imperial Faction, Rogue Assassin. Jin-Woo answers with a single sentence. None. Akame studies him carefully. Her instincts, sharpened by countless missions, tell her two things at once. First, he is not lying. Second, he is far more dangerous than anyone they have ever targeted. She moves subtly to position herself between Jin-Woo and the surviving captives, testing whether he intends to harm them as well. He does not even glance at them. Their fear has already faded from his senses. They are no longer in danger. His attention shifts outward again, beyond the mansion walls. He feels movement above, more guards converging, reinforcements responding to the noise. Without asking permission, without coordinating with Night Raid, he makes another decision. Arise. The fallen guards shudder, flesh stiffens. Darkness seeps into their wounds. One by one, the corpses begin to stand. Hollow eyes ignite with violet light. The underground chamber transforms from a battlefield into something far worse. An army being born. Tatsumi instinctively raises his blade. Even Akame's composure tightens for a fraction of a second. They have seen Teigu manipulate puppets that control beasts, that twist reality in strange ways. But this is different. This is resurrection, absolute control over death itself. Jin-Woo does not explain the mechanics. He simply turns toward the staircase as the newly risen shadows fall into formation behind him. Their armor no longer bears the Empire's insignia. It is swallowed in black. Above-ground chaos spreads through the estate. Servants flee into the gardens. Officers shout conflicting orders. Then the doors burst open. What emerges is not Night Raid. It is a column of Imperial soldiers moving with unnatural coordination. Faces emotionless, blades drawn with silent purpose. They cut through incoming reinforcements without hesitation. The Empire is being destroyed by its own uniform. From the rooftop across the street, Leone watches with disbelief. She has fought corrupt nobles before. She has seen massacres. But this is strategic annihilation. Every guard attempting to flee is intercepted. Every officer trying to regroup is eliminated. No one escapes to report accurately what they are seeing. Panic replaces command structure within minutes. Inside the courtyard, Jin-Woo pauses. His senses stretch across the capital like a net cast into dark water. The malice here is not isolated to one estate, it is everywhere. Human trafficking rings, torture chambers, political purges. This city thrives on quiet suffering. He could leave. He has no obligation to this world. Yet something within him settles on a conclusion. If corruption is systemic, then eliminating individuals is inefficient. The structure itself must be dismantled. Night Raid emerges into the courtyard behind him, forced into an uncomfortable realization. Their mission tonight was meant to destabilize a single noble family. Jin-Woo has already destabilized an entire district. Akame finally speaks, her tone measured. She asks him directly what he intends to do next. Jin-Woo's gaze shifts toward the distant silhouette of the Imperial Palace rising over the capital. His answer is simple. He will judge this nation. Those words ripple outward with far greater consequence than anyone present fully understands, because at that moment two separate wars began, one between the Empire and an unknown force that commands the dead, and another within Night Raid itself, as they confront the possibility that their rebellion may no longer control the future of this country. And far away, within the frozen north, a certain general will soon feel a disturbance worthy of her attention. The first official report reaches the Imperial Palace before sunrise, and it is already fractured by fear. Survivors cannot agree on what they witnessed. Some claim a rogue Teigu capable of mass possession. Others insist it was a demon summoner. One trembling officer swears the dead stood back up and slaughtered their own comrades. The Prime Minister listens with irritation rather than concern. Corruption has made him arrogant. He assumes this is simply another insurgent tactic from the Revolutionary Army. He orders an immediate crackdown across the district and a public execution to reassure the capital. What he does not realize is that there are no bodies left to parade. Jin-Woo has already absorbed every fallen soldier into his ranks. The estate now stands empty, stripped of command, stripped of witnesses, stripped of fear. Only silence remains. It is surgical, efficient, invisible to the untrained eye. Night Raid regroups in the shadows of a nearby alley. Najenda demands a full account. Akame describes the encounter precisely, leaving no exaggeration. A man in black, no insignia, no Teigu activation, command over death itself. Tatsumi interrupts, arguing that whatever Jin-Woo is, he destroyed a monster who deserved it. Leone counters that someone capable of raising an army overnight could just as easily replace one tyrant with another. The debate fractures quickly, because for the first time, Night Raid is not the most lethal force operating in the capital. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo walks alone through the outer district. His shadows disperse into unseen corners, embedding themselves across rooftops, alleyways, sewer entrances. He is mapping the city in real time through them. Every bribe exchanged between officials, every hidden prison cell beneath merchant houses, every imperial officer who delights too much in cruelty. The capital thinks it owns the night. It does not realize the night now answers to someone else. A squad of imperial enforcers finally locates him near a checkpoint gate. They approach with forced confidence, citing emergency authority. Jin-Woo does not slow his pace. The captain attempts to invoke the Emperor's name. That is when the shadows beneath their feet shift. There is no prolonged battle, no exchange of words. The soldiers disappear into darkness before they can finish drawing their weapons. Pedestrians nearby blink in confusion, unsure if they imagined the entire scene. Jin-Woo continues walking as if nothing happened, because to him, nothing significant did. Far above, hidden within a high tower overlooking the capital, a pair of cold blue eyes narrow slightly. Esdeath has been informed of the disturbance. Unlike the Prime Minister, she does not dismiss it. She studies the incomplete reports with genuine interest. An unknown combatant eliminating entire squads without visible strain. The possibility excites her. Strength like that does not belong in the shadows. It belongs on a battlefield. She gives a simple order. Do not kill him yet. I will handle this personally. Back in the slums, Jin-Woo pauses before a warehouse disguised as a grain storage facility. Through the walls, he senses dozens of restrained presences, weak heartbeats, suppressed cries. Human trafficking disguised as imperial logistics. He closes his eyes briefly, confirming the depth of corruption embedded in this system. It is not isolated greed. It is a policy. He steps forward. The warehouse doors implode inward. Guards stationed inside barely register his arrival before shadows engulf them. Chains snap. Prisoners collapse to the floor in disbelief as their captors are dragged screaming into darkness. Jin-Woo surveys the room only long enough to confirm no further threat remains. He does not stay for gratitude. He does not deliver speeches about justice. He simply leaves as quietly as he entered. Word begins spreading through the lower districts by morning. Not of night raid, not of rebellion, but of something else. A black-clad figure who appears where suffering is worst. Soldiers vanish. Abusers disappear. Entire compounds are erased without warning. The rumor evolves quickly. Some call him a demon. Others whisper a different title. The Shadow King. Night Raid hears the whispers too. And for the first time, they are not the symbol inspiring hope in the streets. By the time the sun fully rises over the capital, the balance of power has already shifted in ways no one at the palace can quantify. The Empire believes it is hunting a rogue element. The Revolutionary Army believes it might gain a powerful ally. Neither side understands the truth. Sung Jin-Woo is not choosing between empire or rebellion. He is evaluating whether this entire nation deserves to continue existing. And as his shadows tighten their hold over the capital's darkest corners, the first segment of this war closes not with a battle, but with a realization. The capital is no longer the most dangerous thing in this world. The realization does not come to the empire all at once. It seeps in quietly. A supply convoy disappears without debris left behind. A torture chamber is found abandoned, restraints shattered from the inside, its guards missing from every registry. An entire patrol unit stationed near the southern gate fails to report, yet no signs of combat are discovered. The Prime Minister grows irritated rather than alarmed. He doubles the guard rotations and orders random searches across the outer districts. The result is immediate unrest. Innocent civilians are dragged into the streets. Homes are ransacked. Suspicion replaces stability. And that is exactly what Jin-Woo anticipated. From the highest spire overlooking the capital, he observes through the eyes of his shadows as Imperial soldiers overextend themselves. Every aggressive sweep exposes new corruption. Every desperate search reveals hidden brutality. The Empire begins tearing its own mask off in public. Night Word. Raid watches the shift unfold with unease. Their strategy was always precise. Remove key targets, spark rebellion gradually, control the narrative. But Jin-Woo is not controlling the narrative. He is crushing it. Najenda makes a difficult call. Surveillance only. No direct engagement. Until they understand his objective, confrontation is suicide. Even Bulat, confident in his Incursio armor, remains silent during the briefing. Power on that scale cannot be measured by normal standards. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo moves toward the inner ring of the capital, where the architecture changes from opulence to intimidation. Massive stone statues line the approach to the palace, each one carved to glorify the empire's might. He walks between them without hesitation. The guards posted along the perimeter stiffen as they sense something unnatural pressing against their instincts. One captain attempts to challenge him formally. His voice cracks halfway through the demand. Jin-Woo does not stop. The captain's shadow detaches from the ground behind him, solidifies, and pulls him backward into darkness before the rest of the unit can react. Panic spreads instantly. Swords are drawn. Signals are fired into the sky. But no enemy stands before them. Only empty air and the echo of boots continuing forward. Within the palace, the young emperor is briefed on the escalating incidents. He struggles to understand the scale of what is happening. He was raised to believe the empire is absolute, eternal, untouchable. Yet reports now describe an invisible force dismantling entire divisions overnight. The Prime Minister assures him it is under control. He orders more public displays of strength, more executions, more fear. That decision seals the empire's immediate fate, because Jin-Woo feels it the moment the first innocent is dragged into the square for spectacle. He does not require spies for this. The spike of terror alone is enough. His head lifts slightly as if responding to a distant call. He changes direction. In the execution plaza, crowds are forced to gather under armed supervision. A man accused without evidence kneels beneath the scaffold. The executioner raises his blade. The sky darkens, not with clouds, with shadow. It spreads across the square unnaturally, swallowing sunlight in a perfect radius. The executioner freezes. The guards shout in confusion, and then the ground beneath the platform fractures as black armored figures rise in synchronized formation. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Jin-Woo steps forward into the center of the plaza, coat unmoved by the wind, eyes steady and devoid of theatrics. He does not announce himself. He does not threaten. He simply lifts his hand. The execution platform collapses. The accused prisoner is pulled safely into the shadows behind him. Every Imperial soldier in the square is restrained in an instant, their limbs bound by living darkness. From balconies above, nobles stare in horror as the illusion of control disintegrates before their eyes. Jin-Woo finally speaks, not loudly, yet his voice carries across the entire plaza. This ends now. There is no rage in the statement, no dramatic declaration, just certainty. And in that moment, the capital understands something the Empire never prepared for. This is not rebellion. It is not assassination. It is judgment descending from beyond their system. Far away in the north, Esdeath rises from her throne of ice with a faint smile forming. The disturbance has matured into something worthy. For the first time in years, genuine anticipation sharpens her pulse. Back in the capital as the shadows tighten and imperial authority crumbles in plain sight, Jin-Woo takes his first true step toward the palace gates, not as an invader seeking conquest, not as a revolutionary seeking change, but as the Shadow Monarch prepares to decide whether this empire deserves to survive the night. The capital does not sleep after the plaza incident. It trembles. The execution square remains fractured, stones split open like a wound that refuses to close. Rumors move faster than imperial messengers now. Citizens whisper about a sovereign of darkness walking openly beneath the palace walls. Soldiers sharpen their blades with hands that will not steady. The Prime Minister finally abandons dismissal and chooses escalation. He unleashes the Empire's greatest weapon, not a machine, not a decree, but a person. As death arrives before dawn, frost spreads across rooftops as her presence settles over the district like winter claiming ownership. The air thins. Breath turns visible. Even the most disciplined Imperial guards instinctively lower their eyes as she steps forward. White hair catching the faint light, blue eyes sharp with predatory focus. She surveys the ruined plaza with a faint smile, not disturbed but intrigued. Strength that disrupts order fascinates her. She thrives in chaos so long as she stands at its center. Jin-Woo feels her before he sees her, a pressure unlike the others, focused, refined. Not corruption, not fear. This is ambition sharpened into a weapon. He turns slowly as frost creeps across the broken stone between them. Their eyes meet across the square. No introduction is needed. Power recognizes power without language. Esdeath speaks first. Her tone almost conversational. She thanks him for exposing weakness within the capital. She calls his methods efficient. Then she offers him a place at her side, not beneath her, not above her, beside her. Together she suggests they could end the rebellion in a single campaign and reshape the empire through strength alone. Jin-Woo listens without interruption. His shadows ripple faintly at his feet, responding to the temperature drop but not retreating. When he answers, it is simple. He has no interest in serving a system built on suffering. The smile fades from Esdeath's face, replaced by something far more dangerous: excitement. The ground explodes upward in a surge of ice. Spear-like pillars launch toward Jin-Woo from every angle, fast enough to impale before most opponents register movement. They shatter mid-air as shadows intercept them, forming shields of condensed darkness that fracture but do not break. The impact sends shockwaves through the plaza, cracking nearby structures further. Civilians flee in terror as the temperature plummets sharply. Esdeath does not hesitate. She moves with terrifying speed, ice forming beneath her boots as she closes the distance. Her blade arcs downward, coated in frozen energy capable of cleaving armored beasts in half. Jin-Woo meets the strike not with steel, but with a summoned dagger formed from shadow itself. The collision releases a concussive burst that sends frost and darkness spiraling outward like opposing storms colliding. This is no massacre. This is balance. Imperial soldiers watching from a distance cannot comprehend what they are seeing. Their strongest general engaging an unknown entity whose power does not resemble any Teigu recorded in Imperial archives. Every exchange between them reshapes the battlefield. Ice walls rise only to be swallowed by encroaching shadow. Spears rain from above only to dissolve into black mist before impact. Esdeath laughs mid-combat, exhilarated. She increases the scale instantly. Entire streets freeze solid as she channels her Teigu to its upper threshold. Buildings creak under the strain of sudden glacial expansion. Jin-Woo responds without raising his voice. From every fallen soldier claimed over the past night, shadows emerge across rooftops and alleys, forming ranks behind him. An army manifests in disciplined silence, blades drawn in unison. The capital becomes a war zone within seconds. Esdeath gestures sharply. Imperial cavalry units charge in coordination, trained war beasts coated in reinforced armor surging forward through sheets of ice. Jin-Woo does not move to intercept personally. He issues a single command: advance. The shadows surge forward like a tide breaking against stone. Cavalry collide with armored specters in a clash that turns the frozen streets into a battlefield of splintering ice and shattered steel. War beasts roar as blades of darkness pierce through reinforced plating as if it were cloth. Riders are dragged from their saddles and swallowed into the mass of moving black, their screams cut short as they are claimed. The Empire's finest formation dissolves within moments, discipline collapsing under an enemy that does not fear death because it already owns it. As Death's expression sharpens, she plants her blade into the ground and unleashes a wave of freezing force that radiates outward in a perfect circle. Shadows caught within it crystallize instantly, their forms locked in jagged sculptures of ice. Entire ranks shatter under the pressure. For the first time, her power visibly disrupts Jin-Woo's army. He watches without alarm. Loss does not unsettle him. The fallen simply become potential once more. His hand lifts slightly, and the broken fragments tremble. Darkness seeps through the cracks of ice, reassembling what was destroyed. The frozen specters reform, eyes igniting again with unwavering obedience. That sight shifts something in Esdeath's gaze. This is not merely summoning. This is authority over the cycle itself. She accelerates, vanishing in a burst of cold mist and reappearing directly before Jin-Woo. Her strike is aimed not at his weapon, but at his throat, testing reaction speed rather than strength. He pivots with minimal motion, the blade grazing his coat but never touching skin. His counter is precise, a thrust of shadow aimed at her center of mass. She blocks, ice reinforcing her guard at the exact moment of impact. The shockwave fractures nearby windows across the district. Above them, rooftops collapse under stray blasts of force. Civilians scramble for cover as the battlefield widens unintentionally. Jin-Woo's eyes flick briefly toward the fleeing crowd. Calculation replaces engagement for a fraction of a second. As Death notices, she smiles again. She drives her blade into the ground once more and channels her power vertically. Towering pillars of ice erupt upward, lifting chunks of street and debris into the air, isolating the combat zone into a rising arena of frozen architecture. The surrounding civilians are forced away by the sudden elevation, creating distance between collateral damage and the epicenter. It is both strategic and considerate in her own ruthless way. She wants the fight uninterrupted. Jin-Woo steps onto the elevated ice platform without hesitation. Shadows coil around the base, anchoring it against collapse. His army regroups below, forming a perimeter that prevents Imperial reinforcements from interfering further. Soldiers attempting to approach are intercepted instantly, pulled into darkness before they can even coordinate a formation. Now it is just the two of them above the capital, standing atop a structure forged from opposing elements. As Death's voice carries across the cold air, she tells him that strength should rule without apology, that fear is the purest form of order. She asks again why he refuses to claim the throne outright instead of dismantling it piece by piece. Jin-Woo answers with action rather than philosophy. The sky behind him darkens unnaturally as hundreds of shadow soldiers leap upward, scaling the ice pillars with impossible speed. They converge from every direction, transforming the elevated arena into a vortex of converging blades. As Death closes her eyes briefly, centering herself, when she opens them, the temperature drops so violently that frost creeps across the very air. Time seems to hesitate. She releases a technique reserved for decisive battles. A flash of white engulfs the platform, freezing Shadow's mid-leap, locking the battlefield into suspended stillness. For a heartbeat, everything stops. Except Jin-Woo. He moves through the frozen field untouched, his form phasing between shadow and substance as if the concept of stasis does not fully apply to him. He steps within striking distance of Esdeath while her power strains to contain the anomaly before her. Their eyes meet again at arm's length, the difference between them narrowing into something dangerously personal. Below, the Empire watches its strongest general pushed into unfamiliar territory. And across the city, Night Raid witnesses the impossible unfold, forced to confront a truth neither side wanted to admit. This is no longer a rebellion against corruption. This is a confrontation between two apex predators deciding which vision of order will define the future of the capital. The air hums with tension as the frozen battlefield cracks under the weight of their confrontation. Esdeath pivots, sending a volley of razor-sharp ice shards outward, each one traveling faster than the eye can track. Shadows erupt in response, forming shields, barriers, and counterblades with instinctive precision. Every shard that strikes is absorbed, reflected, or shattered before it can reach Jin-Woo. The capital itself seems to hold its breath as if aware that the battle above could reshape its destiny. As Death's movements become a blur, her speed magnified by Teigu's power, she strikes from angles that defy conventional prediction, each swing of her blade a potential kill. Yet Jin-Woo does not stagger, does not retreat. His body is calm, almost indifferent. As he weaves through the onslaught, shadow tendrils whip around him, intercepting strikes, ripping ice shards from midair and redirecting them with lethal precision. Every counter is silent but devastating. He does not fight to kill immediately. He fights to test, to measure, to establish the extent of her skill. Every swing of her blade, every burst of frost, is catalogued and countered in milliseconds. Jin-Woo's eyes scan for weaknesses, not in her form but in the system she represents. A Teigu is powerful, yes, but it is bound by rules, by limits. He can adapt. He can overcome. Esdeath senses it too. Her attacks grow sharper, more unpredictable, blending ice with raw physicality. She laughs, a sound both cold and exhilarated as she spins through the air, striking from multiple directions simultaneously. Each strike is capable of tearing through stone and flesh alike. Yet Jin-Woo responds effortlessly, shadow blades appearing in anticipation, slicing through the frozen projectiles and meeting her steel with unerring accuracy. The arena of ice begins to deform. Pillars fracture under the weight of collisions. Frost explodes outward with every impact, scattering debris across the rooftops and streets below. Civilians who had fled earlier watch from a distance, eyes wide as the city transforms into a surreal battlefield where light and darkness collide. Jin-Woo's shadow army below the elevated platform begins to engage reinforcements sent to intervene. Teigu's soldiers are cut down, lifted into darkness, and absorbed into his ranks. Every movement is calculated. Every decision is instantaneous. The Empire's forces begin to collapse under pressure, their morale shattering as the sheer scale of his command becomes undeniable. Above, Esdeath lands a precise strike meant to pierce his defense. Shadow swirls around Jin-Woo, twisting and coalescing into an armored form that absorbs the blow without a single tremor. He does not counter immediately. Instead, he advances. Shadow blades forming around his hands and trailing behind him like living extensions. The movement is fluid, almost artistic, yet deadly. Each strike he delivers does not simply clash with her blade. It forces her to react, to expend energy, to adjust. The temperature drops further as Esdeath channels more of Teigu's raw power. Frost spreads across the plaza, freezing parts of the shadow army below, yet Jin-Woo's control is complete. He commands shadows to shift, melt, and reform in real time, neutralizing the freezing effect and maintaining offensive pressure. Every interaction above the capital becomes a masterclass in combat. One wrong move could destroy the plaza entirely, collapse surrounding streets, or obliterate civilians. Yet both fighters maintain a twisted elegance, their strikes precise, their power monumental, their strategy flawless. Night Raid remains hidden, observing. They understand that any interference now would be futile. This battle is beyond their scale, beyond their capacity to influence. They watch not just for survival, but to witness the evolution of combat in real time. Akame, usually composed, cannot hide the flicker of awe in her eyes. Tatsumi's jaw tightens, realizing that this fight is a demonstration of absolute dominance rather than simple power. Esdeath's expression sharpens as she realizes that Jin-Woo does not merely react, he predicts. His shadows anticipate each movement, each attack, each possible counter, nullifying the most brutal strategy she can employ. Her Teigu is still formidable, but she feels the first twinge of genuine challenge. The recognition that she is engaging not a mortal, not even a Teigu wielder in the traditional sense, but an entity whose command over death itself redefines the battlefield. The clash intensifies. Ice and shadow collide continuously, creating explosions of force that shatter the elevated platform and send fragments raining down onto the streets below. Buildings shake, windows shatter, and the distant city watches in terror as the capital itself becomes collateral in the apex battle between these two forces. Jin-Woo steps closer, shadows converging into multiple forms around him. Each figure mirrors his motion, striking in perfect unison. Esdeath spins through the assault, yet even her unmatched speed and precision cannot prevent the shadows from closing in from all directions. The rhythm of battle shifts. She adapts, but the tide is turning. A faint smile crosses Jin-Woo's face. This is not about killing her immediately. It is about dominance, about control, about proving that a Teigu, even one as potent as Esdeath's, cannot match the will of someone who commands the dead. Each strike drives her further back. Each dodge forces her to expend more power. Each block strains her Teigu to its limits. The frozen arena trembles. Streets below are littered with shattered stone and splintered wood. Civilians scream in terror. Imperial soldiers hesitate in confusion and fear. Night Raid cannot look away, caught between admiration and apprehension. The battle has become a spectacle not of politics, not of rebellion, but of two unstoppable forces testing the boundaries of power itself. Above, Esdeath recognizes a shift. Her attacks, though precise and devastating, are being anticipated and countered in ways that defy conventional logic. She realizes fully that she is confronting not a human, not merely a summoner, but a sovereign of shadows. One misstep could end everything. She adjusts, centering herself in a defensive formation, preparing for the next wave, fully aware that the coming exchanges will define who dominates the capital. And in that tense silence, broken only by the clash of ice and shadow, the true scale of this confrontation begins to emerge. It is no longer simply Esdeath versus Jin-Woo. It is Teigu versus shadows, order versus judgment, and the first signs of a war that could redefine the fate of the entire Akame ga Kill universe are written across the frozen, shattered streets of the capital. Esdeath breathes deeply, letting the frost in the air sharpen her senses. She knows now that raw power alone will not grant victory. Precision, strategy, and adaptability are crucial. Her eyes track every shadow that moves below and around Jin-Woo, noting how they weave together like extensions of his will. Each shadow acts independently yet follows a singular purpose. Every swing, every step, every counterattack is calculated to the millisecond. She realizes that to defeat him, she cannot simply rely on strength. She must outthink a force that thinks and reacts faster than instinct itself. She launches herself upward, vanishing into a swirl of ice and wind. From her vantage, she surveys the battlefield like a predator assessing its prey. Shadows below twist and writhe, ready to strike at any moment. Soldiers attempt to flank her, but the instant they enter her zone of engagement, They are frozen, solid, pierced, or swept aside. Her Teigu is lethal in every direction. Yet the shadows adapt. Even as she moves unpredictably, they anticipate, counter, and neutralize every threat without faltering. Jin-Woo's focus remains on her, unbroken by the chaos surrounding him. He does not panic when the ice fractures around his feet or when glacial spikes erupt unpredictably. Each attack is absorbed into his calculations, every threat folded into his command of the shadows. He steps forward deliberately, the shadows beneath him condensing into armored forms that mirror his movements, each one striking simultaneously with surgical precision. The clash escalates to a spectacle that no human could comprehend. Ice and shadow collide with bone-shattering force. Entire rooftops splinter. Stone crumbles beneath the pressure. Wind carries shards of frost and blackened debris in every direction. The streets themselves seem to buckle under the weight of their power. Civilians flee in terror, some climbing precarious ledges to escape the crossfire. The capital, long thought untouchable, has become a war zone of living elements, frozen, alive, and deadly. Esdeath strikes next, combining her speed with brute force. She sends twin blades of ice sweeping toward Jin-Woo from opposite directions. The sheer velocity creates a vacuum of cold that sucks warmth from the surrounding air. Shadows coil instantly, forming kinetic barriers, deflecting the ice with precision. Where her Teigu is raw destructive energy, Jin-Woo's shadows are fluid intelligence, bending to counter without effort, turning offense into defense and defense into offense seamlessly. He steps forward, each movement a study in calm lethality. Shadows surge upward like serpents, striking from angles she cannot predict. Esdeath spins, countering with ice that fractures into shards midair, yet a few shadows slip through. They strike at her flanks, forcing her to retreat slightly. Her smile sharpens, a mixture of thrill and acknowledgement. She has finally encountered someone who can challenge her mastery of battle. The clash intensifies further as Esdeath manipulates the battlefield itself. Streets lift, buildings twist, and spires of ice rise to create a frozen labyrinth designed to trap and divide her opponent. Jin-Woo does not falter. Shadows stretch across broken rooftops, weaving through the architecture as if the city itself obeys his command. Where Esdeath seeks to dominate the environment, he reshapes it with shadows, turning her trap into a corridor of his own making. Every movement now carries consequences. Each strike, each defense, shifts the balance of the battlefield. Imperial soldiers below are helpless to intervene, constantly intercepted and neutralized before reaching either combatant. Civilians can only watch from the edges of destruction, aware that the fate of the capital rests entirely on the outcome of this duel. Esdeath pauses midair, frost swirling violently around her. She studies Jin-Woo with a predator's focus, noting how his shadows adapt instantly, how he anticipates without hesitation, how his calm is absolute even under relentless assault. She knows now that her conventional tactics will not suffice. Every strategy she deploys is countered, and yet she is not defeated. She is pushed, tested, challenged in a way that exhilarates her like nothing has before. Jin-Woo observes her equally carefully. He does not rush, does not attack recklessly. Every motion is a calculation, a judgment, a test of limits. He can sense her skill, the potential of her Teigu, the lethal precision honed through years of battle. He respects it, not as a weakness, but as a necessary variable in his assessment of the capital itself. To dominate this world, he must first understand every force that sustains it. And then the battlefield transforms again. A wave of frost erupts outward from Esdeath, fracturing the streets below and sending shards of ice into the shadows. Jin-Woo's army reacts instantaneously, shifting, dissolving, reassembling, and neutralizing threats that should have been devastating. The two apex powers collide not as warriors, but as forces of nature. Shadow and ice intertwine violently, reshaping the plaza, the streets, the rooftops, and even the air itself. The capital trembles beneath them. Every building shakes, every wall cracks. Citizens scream, Imperial soldiers falter, and Night Raid watches, unable to intervene. The battle is no longer measured in strikes or skill. It is measured in scale, in dominance, in absolute control over reality itself. For the first time, it becomes undeniable. Neither Esdeath nor Jin-Woo is merely fighting. They are testing the limits of possibility. Teigu versus shadows, control versus adaptability, ambition versus judgment. And as their clash escalates, it is clear to everyone observing that the capital will never be the same again. Night Raid watches from the shadows, perched atop a crumbling building overlooking the chaos of the capital. Streets are littered with shattered ice, fractured stone, and the twisting forms of shadows locked in eternal combat. They have never witnessed a battle like this. Akame tightens her grip on her blade, eyes scanning for patterns in Jin-Woo's movements, analyzing how his shadows adapt and respond with instantaneous precision. Tatsumi's jaw is clenched, muscles coiled, the tension in his shoulders betraying the fear he refuses to acknowledge. Leone shifts nervously beside him, fangs barely hidden as she takes in the scale of destruction, understanding that what unfolds below and above is beyond anything their rebellion was designed to confront. Najenda stands slightly apart, her mind racing through possibilities. The entire capital, the Empire's military might, and even Night Raid itself could be obliterated in a single miscalculation. The debate begins quietly. Najenda speaks first, her tone low and controlled, calculating the risk. Should they intervene directly, attempt to coordinate with Jin-Woo, or continue observing? Tatsumi argues for caution, pointing out that interference could provoke either side into viewing them as enemies. Leone insists that they cannot remain idle, that civilians are still trapped in the outskirts and need protection. Akame interrupts, slicing through the tension with cold reasoning. Their goal has never been to pick sides arbitrarily. They fight to dismantle corruption, to eliminate tyranny, and to protect the powerless. Jin-Woo is neither rebel nor imperial. He is a force operating outside every political structure they know. Najenda considers the possibilities. If they attempt a coordinated strike, they risk annihilation. If they attempt to communicate, they might provoke misunderstanding. And if they do nothing, Jin-Woo could erase the Empire entirely, leaving them powerless in the wake of his judgment. Her mind races through every scenario, running simulations like a general commanding armies from a command tent. The truth is undeniable. Night Raid cannot hope to control the outcome, only to influence it. They must gamble. Akame steps forward, and her eyes never leaving the battlefield. She knows that any attempt to engage Jin-Woo directly is suicide, yet she identifies a potential avenue. He is calculating, precise, and deliberate. He does not act recklessly. If they can present themselves as collaborators rather than threats, if they can demonstrate that their objective aligns with his, there may be a slim chance of negotiation. She voices this thought, proposing that they attempt a meeting. Najenda nods slowly, realizing that subtlety and timing will be everything. The gamble is not strength, it is trust, or at least the illusion of it. As the shadows of battle twist below, Night Raid begins their approach. They move with absolute stealth, scaling shattered walls, leaping across rooftops, avoiding detection by both Imperial forces and Jin-Woo's shadow army. Every step is tense, deliberate, measured. The air is heavy with the residue of frost and darkness. The atmosphere electric with the clash of two absolute powers above the streets. Even the wind seems to hold its breath as they close the distance. Finally, they reach a vantage point above the plaza, where Jin-Woo and Esdeath continue their duel. From this height, the scale of destruction is breathtaking. Towers of ice twist and fracture as shadows coil and strike with supernatural coordination. The street-level soldiers are mostly gone, either absorbed into the shadows or frozen in suspended combat. The air vibrates with energy, carrying an almost tangible sense of judgment and inevitability. Najenda signals for the team to halt. Akame studies Jin-Woo's position and movement, calculating the precise moment when they might be noticed but not threatened. Tatsumi whispers his concern, suggesting that even if they are careful, one misstep could provoke a deadly response. Leone growls softly, stating that they must act regardless. The people of the capital cannot continue as collateral in a war that is spiraling out of control. Akame agrees silently, already plotting the path to reach Jin-Woo without exposing themselves to his shadows. Every shadow soldier below reacts instantly to any threat, yet they appear programmed for containment, not negotiation. This is a critical detail they can exploit. Najenda takes a deep breath and issues the signal. Night Raid leaps forward, descending carefully into the area just outside Jin-Woo's immediate field of perception. Their strategy is delicate: avoid aggression, maintain visibility, and communicate intent. Akame steps into the light briefly, her blade held at the ready but lowered in a non-threatening posture. Tatsumi follows, armor glinting but movements non-hostile. Leone covers the rear, her presence a deterrent without aggression. Every member is hyper-aware that a single misstep could end their lives instantly. Jin-Woo's gaze shifts, focusing on the group as if noticing them for the first time. His shadows ripple slightly in response, sensing the new presences. Yet he does not attack. He observes. It becomes clear that he does not view them as threats yet, only as unknown variables. The gamble Night Raid is taking depends entirely on this moment of perception. Akame takes a slow step forward, bowing slightly in acknowledgement of his authority, her voice steady as she speaks his name and attempts to explain their position. Esdeath notices too, freezing mid-motion in the background, watching with a faint smirk as the human rebellion approaches the Shadow Monarch. She understands that they are playing a high-stakes game, and she cannot help but appreciate the audacity. Jin-Woo tilts his head, analyzing their words, their posture, their intent. His eyes glow faintly as he evaluates them, weighing the value of alliance versus irrelevance. For the first time, Night Raid witnesses the strategic patience of an apex predator, a being whose reaction is not reflexive but deliberate, whose next move could redefine the balance of power in the capital entirely. Akame continues, carefully outlining their objective: to mitigate civilian casualties, prevent the Empire from consolidating power again, and ensure that no unnecessary destruction occurs. Jin-Woo listens, shadows coiling subtly yet remaining restrained, his presence imposing but not immediately hostile. He does not speak, but his attention alone conveys understanding. Najenda exhales slowly, understanding that this moment could define the future of both Night Raid and the capital. Their gamble is laid bare. Trust an entity whose power dwarfs any they have encountered, whose motives remain inscrutable, and hope that alignment of interests can be enough to prevent catastrophe. The battlefield below pulses with latent energy as frost and shadows writhe in eternal combat, and for the first time Night Raid realizes that their survival depends not on blades or stealth, but on their ability to navigate the will of a force far beyond any human measure. The plaza is tense. Every heartbeat of the soldiers below, every whisper of wind through fractured streets, every ripple of shadow energy feels amplified. Night Raid's gamble is in motion, and the first moment of dialogue with Jin-Woo will determine whether they are witnesses, allies, or casualties in a war that is already consuming the capital from the ground up. Akame's voice carries over the frozen battlefield, firm and unwavering. She proposes a temporary truce, offering cooperation against Esdeath, while making clear that their ultimate goal is justice for the oppressed. Jin-Woo's shadow army shifts subtly, the forms rippling and vibrating with awareness, yet they remain at the ready rather than striking. His eyes meet Akame's, and the silence stretches, heavy with consequence. Every second holds the potential to ignite or diffuse the tension. Above them, Esdeath observes the subtle negotiation, calculating her own next move. A faint grin curves her lips as she considers the possibility of manipulating Night Raid or Jin-Woo to her advantage, fully aware that this engagement has become more than a duel. It is a chess match with lives, power, and the fate of the capital as stakes. Night Raid cannot afford hesitation. The entire gamble hinges on how they present themselves, how carefully they navigate the first interaction, and whether Jin-Woo deems their objectives worthy of acknowledgement. And as the shadows stir and ice fractures across the plaza, the first true gamble of this encounter begins to unfold in silence, measured movement, and the delicate balance between survival and annihilation. Night Raid holds its breath as Jin-Woo's gaze sweeps over them. Shadows twitching subtly with awareness, but offering no immediate attack. Akame senses that he is evaluating more than their words. He is reading intent, measuring their potential threat, and calculating their usefulness in a fraction of a second. Every step, every subtle gesture is being analyzed, yet there is no hostility. It is as if they are standing before an entity that exists beyond morality, beyond allegiance, seeing only purpose and capability. Najenda signals the team to maintain calm. Even a blink out of place could be interpreted as aggression. Tatsumi shifts slightly, testing the limits of proximity without drawing attention, acutely aware of the invisible tension radiating from Jin-Woo. Leone's muscles tense, her instincts screaming for an opening, yet she restrains herself, understanding that this is not a fight to be won with raw strength. Akame steps closer, voice steady but measured, reiterating their proposition. They are here not to fight him, not to challenge him, but to align their objective temporarily, minimize civilian casualties, contain the chaos, and perhaps influence the eventual outcome in favor of justice rather than blind judgment. Jin-Woo's expression remains unreadable, shadows coiling and stretching as he absorbs their words. He does not respond immediately, giving nothing away, forcing Night Raid to endure the longest silence of their lives. Every member feels the weight of his observation, as if he can see past their bodies and into the intent behind their hearts. Finally, he tilts his head slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that he understands the proposition. He does not nod, he does not speak, yet the tension eases fractionally. Akame senses the shift and moves slightly forward, signaling trust. She emphasizes that their goal aligns, if only temporarily, and that cooperation could prevent needless bloodshed. Jin-Woo allows a shadow figure to detach and move outward slowly, an almost imperceptible test of their intentions. The figure pauses, assessing Night Raid, then retracts without incident. It is a small but critical sign. He is neither attacking nor retreating. He is observing. Esdeath notices the subtle interaction and tilts her head, curiosity piqued. She does not intervene yet, intrigued by the audacity of Night Raid to approach Jin-Woo directly. From her elevated position, she watches, calculating how their presence could be manipulated. Her mind races through tactical possibilities. If they succeed in aligning with him, she might need to recalibrate her own strategy. If they fail, she can exploit their hesitation. Her grin widens slightly, a mixture of amusement and anticipation. Below, the streets remain tense. Imperial soldiers that have survived earlier encounters are cautious, uncertain whether to continue engagement or retreat. Civilians peek cautiously from behind corners, sensing a fragile ceasefire in the midst of chaos. Even the environment seems to react, frozen fragments of ice hovering mid-air while shadows twist around broken architecture, creating a surreal battlefield of stasis and potential motion. Najenda signals for a slow advance. Night Raid begins moving slightly closer, each step deliberate, ensuring that their body language is non-threatening. Akame continues to speak softly, explaining their capabilities, the objectives of their rebellion, and their commitment to justice. Jin-Woo's shadows ripple subtly with each word, almost as if testing their sincerity. This is the core of Night Raid's gamble. Trust must be earned instantly, or the consequences are fatal. Jin-Woo finally steps forward slightly, his coat brushing against the frozen plaza, shadows trailing in perfect unison behind him. The shift is minimal but deliberate, signaling that he has acknowledged their presence as non-hostile. The subtle gesture is enough for Najenda to give the team a silent nod. They have passed the first threshold, but the true test has only just begun. Tatsumi feels a mixture of relief and tension. The gamble is not over. They are alive, yes, but only because Jin-Woo has chosen to observe rather than destroy. Leone remains taut, ready to react, her instincts warning her that even a slight misstep could trigger immediate annihilation. Akame's eyes, sharp and calculating, watch for patterns, reading his movements for insight into the limitations of his judgment and the potential for collaboration. Esdeath watches silently from above, her grin fading into a calm, measured assessment. The duel below continues, but now a third variable exists: Night Raid. Their presence changes the battlefield not by brute force, but by introducing negotiation, strategy, and uncertainty into the apex conflict. Esdeath considers her next move carefully. Should she exploit their arrival, strike at them as potential liabilities, or continue focusing on Jin-Woo, confident that her Teigu will prevail regardless? Jin-Woo shifts again, shadows condensing into forms that almost mirror Night Raid, but do not approach threateningly. The subtle mimicry is deliberate, an unspoken test of understanding and alignment. Akame notes the psychological strategy, recognizing that he is assessing their intentions in ways beyond conventional communication. Najenda realizes that this is as close to a conversation as he is willing to allow, trust and perception conveyed through action rather than words. Night Raid holds their ground, careful to mirror restraint with respect. Akame speaks again, carefully acknowledging his power and authority while emphasizing their shared desire to mitigate suffering. Shadows pulse softly around Jin-Woo, almost like a heartbeat, responding to the sincerity of their proposal. This is the delicate equilibrium of the gamble. One wrong step, one perceived threat, and the balance could collapse instantly into violence. For the first time, a tentative understanding begins to emerge. Jin-Woo does not attack. He does not demand allegiance. He simply observes, tests, and measures. Night Raid recognizes that their gamble has yielded a narrow but critical window. They may influence him, they may cooperate, and they may survive this engagement, but only if their actions remain precise, deliberate, and aligned with the objective of survival and justice. The frozen plaza hums with the latent energy of shadow and ice, both forces locked in a battle of supremacy above the streets, while Night Raid treads carefully within the delicate space between the two. Their gamble is in motion, hinting entirely on their ability to navigate Jin-Woo's judgment, Esdeath's observation, and the unpredictable chaos consuming the capital. The stakes are absolute. Failure means death. Success may offer a fragile foothold in a war that has already begun to consume the city and everyone in it. Night Raid moves with cautious precision, every step calculated to avoid provoking Jin-Woo's shadows while still asserting their presence. The plaza below is a chaotic tableau of frozen structures and writhing darkness, the aftermath of an ongoing battle that dwarfs anything the rebellion has previously encountered. The sheer scale of destruction is overwhelming. Smoke rises from shattered streets, and shards of ice hang in the air like suspended daggers. Every second, the tension thickens, and Night Raid feels the weight of being spectators, participants, and negotiators simultaneously. Akame steps forward slightly, her blade lowered, voice steady as she addresses Jin-Woo again. She emphasizes that their goal aligns with his, not conquest, not destruction, but the protection of innocence and the elimination of corruption. Tatsumi and Leone mirror her movements, careful not to draw attention but maintaining a posture of readiness. Najenda's gaze sweeps over the plaza, calculating escape routes, contingencies, and leverage points should the situation deteriorate. Every action is deliberate. Every gesture matters. Jin-Woo's eyes sweep over them, unblinking and analytical. Shadows ripple at his feet, twisting and coiling as if testing their intentions without aggression. There is no sudden movement, no overt display of dominance. Instead, his presence alone communicates authority. Night Raid senses that this is a being who does not need to strike to enforce his will. The mere potential for action is enough to command obedience. The realization presses down on them. Survival in this space depends not on courage or strength, but on perception, alignment, and clarity of intent. A faint ripple runs through Jin-Woo's shadows, almost imperceptible, signaling recognition rather than hostility. Akame interprets it as the first positive sign in their gamble. She presses forward cautiously, outlining Night Raid's objectives in more detail, limiting collateral damage, preventing Imperial consolidation, and creating a pathway for a more just future in the capital. Her voice is measured, precise, conveying resolve without arrogance. Every word is chosen to demonstrate alignment without challenging his authority. Observes from her vantage point, ice crackling around her as she evaluates the exchange. Her grin is gone, replaced by a sharp focus. She understands that Night Raid is attempting something audacious, stepping into a game far beyond their normal operations. She sees potential risk and opportunity. By interacting with Jin-Woo, they may either tip the balance in favor of one force or reveal themselves as liabilities. Her mind races with possibilities, calculating the perfect moment to intervene or exploit the unfolding negotiation. Jin-Woo shifts slightly, shadows condensing into forms that mimic Night Raid's movements with subtle delay. It is an unspoken test, a psychological probe. He watches how they react to pressure without directly engaging, gauging their discipline, their cohesion, and their intentions. Night Raid responds with perfect synchronicity, maintaining composure, timing, and restraint. This silent interaction becomes an exchange of strategy rather than conflict, a dialogue conducted through movement, awareness, and mutual recognition. Tatsumi feels the intensity pressing inward. The battlefield below and above is a living entity, shaped by ice and shadow, yet every move is observed and measured. He realizes that survival hinges not on combat skill alone, but on understanding the psychology of a being who operates beyond conventional limits. Leone, sensing the same truth, keeps her body taut, prepared to act at the smallest sign of hostility while avoiding any action that could be misinterpreted as a threat. Nagenda's mind is a whirlwind of scenarios. Every potential mistake, every misstep by Night Raid could provoke Jin-Woo into using lethal force. Conversely, every calculated gesture of alignment could earn his cooperation, even temporary. She recognizes that their gamble is not simply to survive, but to influence the outcome of a battle that has already redefined the capital. Every decision she makes in these next moments carries weight far beyond the immediate consequences. Jin-Woo finally makes a subtle motion, stepping slightly closer without aggression. Shadows ripple outward, enveloping the perimeter like a silent boundary. It is a signal of conditional trust. Night Raid interprets it as an opening, a narrow window to establish a cooperative understanding. Akame, perceiving the shift, emphasizes their shared objective once more, speaking directly to the reasoning behind their intervention and demonstrating their intent to act as allies rather than obstacles. The plaza hums with latent energy. Frost and darkness swirl around the combatants above, while below, Night Raid navigates the delicate balance between negotiation and survival. The gamble is clear. Maintain composure, convey alignment, and ensure that every movement reinforces the perception that their presence benefits rather than threatens. Failure is not an option. Any misjudgment could trigger immediate annihilation, not just of Night Raid, but potentially of entire sections of the capital. Jin-Woo's shadows shift again, forming an unbroken circle around the plaza and Night Raid. The action is deliberate and silent, a boundary that is both protective and evaluative. Akame notes the implicit understanding. They may operate within this space without immediate threat, but all actions are under scrutiny. It is a fragile equilibrium, dependent entirely on their ability to maintain intent, clarity, and alignment with his judgment. Time stretches as the silent standoff continues. Every heartbeat, every subtle gesture, every movement of shadow and ice carries significance. Night Raid's gamble is unfolding perfectly, but precariously. The stakes could not be higher. Their survival, their influence, and the future of the capital itself hang on the careful navigation of a negotiation conducted without words, enforced by power beyond imagination. As the shadows pulse and the frost twists above, Night Raid realizes the critical truth of their position. They are no longer rebels in the shadows. They are players in a high-stakes game against forces that defy conventional understanding, operating on a level where trust and perception outweigh raw strength. Their gamble has begun, and the outcome will shape not only their fate, but the fate of an entire city teetering on the edge of destruction and judgment. The capital quakes with the weight of the ongoing conflict. Ice shards and shadows stretch across the plaza like living extensions of the duel above, while below, Night Raid carefully navigates Jin-Woo's observation without provoking a misstep. Yet in the Emperor's chambers, far above the chaos, a new strategy is taking shape. The young ruler, previously sheltered and indecisive, now watches reports flood in. From all corners of the city, the plaza lies in ruin. Elite soldiers have vanished or been destroyed, and whispers of an unstoppable shadow force reach even the most insulated corridors of power. Panic is starting to creep into his voice, breaking the usual veneer of composed authority. The Prime Minister leans close, whispering hurried counsel, but the Emperor barely registers it. His eyes are fixed on a single unsettling fact. No Imperial force, no Teigu wielder, not even his strongest generals, has been able to control the battlefield. Esdeath is engaged at the edge of her limits. Her Teigu strained under the power of an opponent she cannot easily crush. Every calculated move she makes is countered by shadow soldiers that act as extensions of Jin-Woo's will. The Emperor's hands tighten over the ornate railing, fingers pressing into gilded gold, as he realizes that conventional tactics will no longer suffice. Desperation forces him to consider an option previously unthinkable: the Emperor's trump card, a weapon hidden from even his generals until the most dire circumstances. In the secret vault beneath the palace, massive iron doors conceal an artifact of overwhelming, destructive power, a Teigu of such magnitude that its mere deployment could obliterate entire districts. Advisors have long feared its use, knowing that, while it could turn the tide, it could also annihilate everything the Empire seeks to protect. The Emperor hesitates, aware that invoking the weapon marks a point of no return. Once released, there will be no retreat, no negotiation, no possibility of control over the consequences. The decision is made with trembling resolve. He issued the command to prepare the Teigu for immediate deployment. Vault doors grind open, revealing a massive black-forged device adorned with crimson sigils that pulse faintly like a heartbeat. Its size alone suggests catastrophic potential. Scholars and servants who witness it are frozen in awe and terror. The artifact exudes energy so intense that even the air around it vibrates, carrying a faint hum that resonates through the palace's stone walls. It is a force designed to enforce absolute dominance at any cost. Death senses the shift immediately. Even as she continues her duel with Jin-Woo above the plaza, a chill runs deeper than the winter's frost she commands. She understands instinctively that the Emperor has escalated beyond conventional means. Her expression sharpens, blue eyes narrowing, calculating the potential impact of this hidden weapon. She considers the risks, the timing, and the devastating possibilities if it is unleashed. Yet she also recognizes that the Emperor's desperation may be the leverage she needs to gain control of the battlefield. The Teigu is lifted into position, massive chains and reinforced platforms aligning to stabilize its weight. The Emperor watches intently, sweat forming at his brow despite the chill of the chamber. He issues final commands, ensuring that every soldier assigned to its deployment understands the catastrophic force they now wield. Any hesitation, any mistake, and the weapon could collapse upon its operators. The chamber echoes with the grinding and clanging of reinforced iron as the artifact is maneuvered into alignment with the plaza below. In the streets, Night Raid remains focused on maintaining their fragile trust with Jin-Woo. Akame senses the subtle shift in the environment. The faint tremor underfoot that suggests massive force is being mobilized somewhere beyond their immediate perception. She alerts her team to potential danger, whispering warnings about energy fluctuations that do not originate from Jin-Woo or Esdeath. Tatsumi narrows his eyes, scanning the skyline for any unusual movement, while Leon's muscles tense instinctively, ready to spring into action. Jin-Woo, ever observant, senses the disturbance almost immediately. His shadows ripple, reacting instinctively to the surge of unnatural energy emanating from the direction of the palace. He tilts his head, analyzing the trajectory and potential scale of the incoming threat. Unlike most, he does not flinch. Instead, he calculates, considers, and adjusts the deployment of his soldiers. Each figure shifts to cover the plaza and surrounding streets, forming a dynamic barrier designed to adapt to sudden, catastrophic changes. The subtle awareness of absolute judgment guides every movement. The Emperor issues the final activation command. Crimson sigils along the Teigu flare violently, casting harsh light across the palace walls and streets below. Energy pulses outward in visible waves, warping the air and twisting shadows in its path. The device hums with anticipation, waiting for the final release. Soldiers on the platform flinch at the intensity, their arms straining under the impossible weight. Esdeath freezes in mid-action, her Teigu momentarily suspended as she gauges the magnitude of the unfolding escalation. Night Raid's eyes widen as the pulse reaches their vantage point. They realize immediately the level of threat. The weapon is not intended to subdue Jin-Woo or Esdeath alone. It is a city-level annihilator, capable of indiscriminate devastation. Akame glances at Jin-Woo, aware that any intervention requires extreme caution. He does not speak, but his posture and the subtle shift of shadows convey understanding. This is no ordinary weapon. It is a gamble of absolute risk, and survival depends entirely on timing, strategy, and the ability to anticipate a force beyond conventional comprehension. Tatsumi and Leon exchange brief, tense glances. Both understand that while Night Raid's gamble had been risky, the Emperor's trump card elevates the stakes to unprecedented levels. The battlefield below is no longer merely the arena for a duel or a negotiation. It is now the focal point of potential annihilation. Civilians in distant districts sense tremors, panic spreading in waves as rumors of destructive energy surge. Even the city itself seems to respond, its fractured streets trembling as if aware of the power concentrated above. The Emperor, bathed in the crimson glow of his Teigu, watches with fevered anticipation. Pride, fear, and desperation mingle in equal measure. He believes that this weapon will finally assert control over the forces threatening his authority, yet he remains unaware of the full measure of the entity he is attempting to challenge. Jin-Woo observes with calm precision, shadows shifting subtly, already preparing for a response that will test the limits of the Emperor's creation. Esdeath, sensing the imminent release, channels her Teigu defensively while evaluating potential strategies. She could attempt to destroy the weapon mid-deployment, redirect its power, or even manipulate its release to her advantage. Every option carries immense risk, and every delay could prove catastrophic. The tension in the plaza is palpable. Frost and shadows swirl violently around the duel above, while the city holds its collective breath. The Emperor's trump card is ready to unleash, but the outcome, destruction, containment, or countermeasure, is anything but certain. Night Raid watches, silent and tense, understanding the delicate balance between survival, intervention, and the potential to influence the outcome. Akame's hand tightens on her blade. Tatsumi and Leon are prepared for immediate action if necessary. Jin-Woo's shadows expand subtly, sensing, calculating, and responding to the presence of the weapon. Esdeath's glare sharpens, focused on both the artifact and the shadow sovereign confronting her. The moment stretches. Every observer, every participant, Every piece of the battlefield exists on a knife's edge. The Emperor is poised to release a weapon capable of reshaping the capital entirely. Jin-Woo, Esdeath, and Night Raid are positioned to respond in real time. And in that tense instant, it becomes clear that the next action will not only determine the fate of the duel, but the survival of the entire city and everyone caught in the deadly balance between shadow, ice, and overwhelming force. The air above the capital vibrates with an almost tangible intensity as the Teigu begins to hum with lethal energy. Crimson sigils flare brighter, casting long, ominous shadows across fractured rooftops and twisted streets below. The sheer magnitude of power radiates outward, warping reality itself and sending tremors through the frozen battlefield where Jin-Woo and Esdeath continue their duel. Soldiers scattered across the city pause mid-step, sensing the invisible weight pressing down from above. Night Raid's hearts pound in their chests as they realize the weapon's scale is beyond anything they've encountered. It is not a tool, it is an existential threat, capable of erasing everything in its path without distinction. Jin-Woo tilts his head slightly, analyzing the trajectory of the energy pulses. Shadows ripple outward instinctively, forming layers of adaptive defense across the plaza and surrounding streets. He does not move recklessly. Each shadow soldier positions itself as both shield and scout, anticipating the weapon's destructive potential. His eyes glow faintly, absorbing every detail, calculating variables that even the most experienced strategists would fail to recognize. There is a calm in his demeanor that contrasts sharply with the mounting tension. A predator aware of every move in a game where most participants can barely see the board. Esdeath freezes mid-strike, her instincts screaming as she senses the weapon's presence. Frost crackles violently around her Teigu as she evaluates its destructive capability. Her mind races through every possible countermeasure, redirecting the energy, attempting to dismantle the weapon, or drawing Jin-Woo into a trap where the release could be mitigated. Each option carries immense risk. A miscalculation could destroy her, the plaza, and countless civilians instantly. She realizes that even her unmatched speed and precision are limited in the face of an indiscriminate force designed for mass devastation. Najenda signals the Night Raid to hold their positions. Akame grips her blade tightly, careful not to provoke Jin-Woo's attention unnecessarily while preparing for potential intervention. Tatsumi and Leone mirror her caution, their senses heightened as they watch the sky above for any sign of activation. The tremors intensify, reverberating through the broken streets, and even the shattered fragments of ice that still hover mid-air seem to pulse with the anticipation of catastrophe. Every second stretches, every heartbeat feels amplified, and the balance between survival and annihilation hangs by a thread. The Emperor, seated within his observation chamber, sweats despite the distant chill of the plaza. His fingers tighten around the railing, knuckling white as he issues the final sequence to release Teigu's full potential. A deep, resonant hum fills the chamber, echoing through the halls and streets below, carrying with it the promise of destruction. Advisors and soldiers alike step back instinctively, eyes wide as the power grows to levels that feel almost sentient. The Emperor believes in the supremacy of his trump card, but he cannot see the unseen variables now converging against him. Suddenly, the Teigu releases a massive pulse of energy, sending a shockwave through the city. Windows shatter, rooftops quake, and dust and debris are thrown into the air. Shadows twist violently in response, some snapping back as if recoiling from a force that seeks to overwhelm them. Jin-Woo's figure remains calm, his shadow soldiers absorbing, dispersing and redirecting the energy with precise coordination. His eyes meet Night Raid's briefly, conveying understanding without words. Survive, observe, and trust in adaptation. Esdeath counters instinctively, creating a towering wall of ice to deflect the initial shockwave. The force fractures parts of the frozen structure, sending shards spiraling outward. She moves with lethal intent, striking at any residual energy that approaches her. But Teigu's pulse is relentless, pushing against even her defenses. The balance of power shifts subtly. She realizes that while she remains formidable, the scope of destruction is now beyond her ability to control alone. Below, Night Raid braces for collateral impact. Akame's blade glints as she positions herself between debris and potential civilian casualties. Tatsumi tightens his grip, scanning for falling structures or dangerous energy dispersal. Leone's claws extend instinctively, prepared to leap into action at the first sign of threat. Nagenda's mind races through contingencies, calculating evacuation routes, defensive positions, and potential ways to influence the battlefield without provoking Jin-Woo's wrath. Jin-Woo's shadows respond in perfect synchronization. They stretch, coil, and surge outward, forming a living barrier that absorbs, diverts, and neutralizes the raw destructive force of the Emperor's Teigu. The energy pulses collide with the shadows, sending reverberations through the plaza and shattering nearby ice structures. Yet the shadows remain unbroken, adapting with near instantaneous precision. Each strike is met with counterforce, each wave of energy redirected, absorbed, or transformed. The Emperor watches in disbelief as Teigu's first release fails to achieve immediate devastation. His eyes widen in a mix of fear and frustration. He has unleashed his ultimate weapon, expecting immediate control over the battlefield, yet Jin-Woo stands unshaken, commanding forces that react faster than the thought, with coordination beyond comprehension. Even Esdeath's formidable defenses are tested to their absolute limits. The Emperor's trump card, the culmination of the Empire's secretive power, is meeting an opponent who defies the very principles of battle. Tension rises to a breaking point. The plaza, streets, and rooftops quiver under the combined forces of shadow, ice, and unleashed Teigu energy. Civilians still trapped at the edges of the chaos scream in terror as fragments of ice and debris whirl dangerously around them. The Emperor grips the railing tighter, desperation clawing at him as he attempts to recalibrate, issue new commands, and regain control. His confidence falters for the first time as he realizes that sheer destructive power alone is not sufficient to dominate a force like Jin-Woo. Above the battlefield, the duel continues, but the focus has shifted. The Emperor's Teigu has altered the rules of engagement entirely. Jin-Woo adapts seamlessly, Esdeath counters as best as she can, and Night Raid navigates the delicate balance of survival and influence. Every second stretches longer, every movement becomes more critical, and the outcome of this gamble hangs in the balance. The Emperor's trump card has been played, yet the final impact is still uncertain. Survival, strategy, and adaptability now matter more than strength or authority, and every participant senses that the coming moments will redefine the capital forever. The shockwave from the Teigu pulses outward again, more intense this time, distorting the air and warping shadows like living serpents. Streets split under the energy's force, and distant buildings tremble as fragments of ice and stone rain down unpredictably. Night Raid is forced into motion. Akame darts to shield civilians caught in alleyways, her movements precise and rapid, while Tatsumi reacts instinctively to debris, leaping to intercept shards too large to dodge. Leone springs across fractured rooftops, landing with lethal grace to protect allies and innocents alike. Nagenda coordinates silently, directing their movements like a conductor guiding an orchestra through chaos, ensuring that their fragile alignment with Jin-Woo remains intact. Above the plaza, Jin-Woo remains eerily calm. Shadows twist and surge around him, forming both offense and defense with fluidity that defies mortal comprehension. He does not panic. Instead, he studies the energy release, noting its magnitude, trajectory, and rate of acceleration. Each pulse of the Emperor's Teigu is met with countermeasures that do not merely react, but anticipate, forcing the destructive waves to expend their energy against adaptive barriers, dissipating much of the devastation before it can reach Night Raid or the surrounding cityscape. Every shadow soldier is an extension of his strategic will, absorbing, redirecting, and neutralizing with surgical precision. Esdeath, meanwhile, is pushed to the edge of her limits. Her Teigu crackles violently, ice-forming shields, spikes, and whips to counter the energy. Yet every action is met with resistance by shadows that move faster than her attacks. She pivots, strikes, and retreats with supernatural speed, yet a subtle unease flickers in her eyes. The Emperor's trump card has shifted the battlefield into a scale where even her immense power is strained to its boundaries. She realizes that she is no longer simply dueling Jin-Woo. She is navigating an evolving war between absolute forces where every decision carries irreversible consequences. The Emperor watches from his chamber, his earlier confidence dissolving into growing dread. Every pulse of the Teigu meets unexpected resistance. Soldiers responsible for deployment stare in disbelief as the weapon's energy is absorbed and redirected in ways they cannot understand. The Emperor's trump card, once the ultimate symbol of control and dominance, now feels unpredictable, as if its destructive potential has been neutralized by the sheer will of a force he does not comprehend. Fear coils in his chest, mingling with desperation. He realizes that unleashing absolute power may have been a miscalculation. Night Raid senses the gravity of the moment. Akame's voice is calm but urgent, directing movements to ensure civilians remain protected while avoiding any unnecessary provocation of Jin-Woo's shadows. Tatsumi's gaze sweeps the plaza, calculating escape routes and protective measures, while Leone positions herself strategically, ready to intercept any sudden threats. Najenda coordinates silently, understanding that their survival and the preservation of innocence depend entirely on precision, timing, and alignment with Jin-Woo's adaptive judgment. Jin-Woo's next movements are decisive. Shadows surge upward, coiling like serpents, then strike outward, interacting with the waves of Teigu energy in a controlled but devastating display. The energy pulses are absorbed, fragmented, and redirected with absolute efficiency. Entire sections of the plaza that should have been obliterated remain intact, protected by the adaptive intelligence of his shadow soldiers. The Emperor's expression shifts from confidence to confusion, then to panic as he realizes that his ultimate weapon is being neutralized without a single direct strike from its intended target. Esdeath moves aggressively, attempting to exploit any residual weaknesses in the energy's dispersion. Yet each strike is anticipated and countered by shadows that shift in real time. She pivots, creating ice barriers, smashing energy waves with brute force and striking at openings, but the battlefield has become a dynamic system of energy and counter-energy, one that favors calculation and adaptation over raw destruction. Even her Teigu's might cannot assert control over the evolving chaos. Night Raid, still positioned carefully around the edges of the plaza, watches with a mixture of awe and tension. Every action of Jin-Woo's shadows conveys intelligence, strategy, and judgment. Akame exchanges a brief glance with Tatsumi, silently acknowledging that this is not a battle they could influence through force alone. Their role has shifted from combatants to facilitators, observers, and guardians, ensuring that the city and its civilians do not fall victim to the clash of forces far beyond human comprehension. The Emperor's trump card pulses again, louder and more destructive than before. Crimson energy arcs across the plaza like a tide of fire and light. Yet Jin-Woo's shadows absorb and redirect, twisting the force harmlessly into the air or back toward the edges of the battlefield. Esdeath's ice reacts instinctively, but she can feel the strain building. The combined forces of Teigu and Shadow create a surreal dance of destruction and mitigation, a display of apex power colliding with absolute adaptability. As the tremors settle slightly, the Emperor realizes that the balance of the capital has shifted irreversibly. His trump card, once a symbol of ultimate dominance, has failed to decisively tip the scales. Jin-Woo's presence, his shadows, and the calculated resilience of Night Raid have transformed the battlefield into a dynamic system that no single force can dominate. The Emperor's gamble has brought the city to the brink, yet it is clear that the outcome will be determined not by raw power, but by strategy, adaptability, and the judgment of a being who exists beyond conventional authority. Every participant senses it. The frozen plaza, the shattered streets, the twisting shadows, and the remaining ice formations bear witness to a confrontation that will define the future of the capital. Night Raid remains poised, Jin-Woo remains composed, and Esdeath continues her relentless assault. The Emperor's trump card has been revealed, unleashed, and tested. But the next moves, the responses, the counters, the strategies, will ultimately determine who controls the fate of the city and who falls into ruin. The capital lies in shambles. Streets are fractured, buildings splintered, and the once pristine plazas are now scarred with craters, ice shards, and the writhing silhouettes of shadows that move with a mind of their own. Smoke rises from the edges of the city, carrying the acrid scent of frost and scorched stone. From a distance, the scene looks like the aftermath of a siege waged by forces far beyond mortal comprehension, and, in a sense, that is exactly what it is. Jin-Woo stands amidst the chaos, his presence absolute, shadows coiling and pulsing around him like extensions of his will, each movement calculated, precise, and terrifying in its beauty. He surveys the battlefield with the unflinching composure of a predator assessing the remnants of prey. And in that moment, the capital itself seems to acknowledge that a new order has been established, one dictated not by the Empire, not by Esdeath, and not even by Night Raid, but by a singular force whose judgment is absolute. Esdeath remains defiant, her Teigu sparking violently as she braces against the aftermath of the Emperor's failed trump card. Her eyes, piercing and unyielding, scan Jin-Woo, searching for weakness, flaw, any opening that could allow her to regain control. Yet the Shadow Monarch's presence is impenetrable. His shadows ripple and respond to every potential threat before it can materialize, countering with speed, coordination, and precision that leave even her unparalleled abilities stretched to the limit. Each strike she unleashes meets resistance, not just from the shadows themselves, but from the calculated intelligence that drives them. Her teeth grit in frustration as she recognizes that brute strength and tactical genius combined may still be insufficient to challenge the reality-altering force before her. Night Raid moves cautiously through the remnants of the plaza, their roles shifted from direct combatants to careful navigators of a battlefield shaped by forces far beyond human limits. Akame's blade glints under the dim light, her movements measured, precise, and intentional. Reflecting the need to maintain control and avoid misinterpretation by Jin-Woo's ever-watchful shadows, Tatsumi and Leona flank her, each action synchronized, a dance of survival and strategy. Najenda coordinates silently, issuing subtle signals, guiding their paths around unpredictable hazards, debris, and the residual energy of the Emperor's destructive Teigu. Their mission is no longer offensive. It is about survival, observation, and the delicate task of influencing the outcome in ways that preserve lives amidst chaos. Jin-Woo steps forward, shadows cascading and extending like a living tide over the fractured streets. His presence dominates the plaza, yet there is no outward aggression. Each movement is purposeful, an assertion of control without malice. He does not annihilate indiscriminately. He asserts judgment with deliberate precision, targeting only those threats that remain, neutralizing them efficiently while preserving potential allies and innocents caught in the chaos. The scale of his power is breathtaking. Entire streets bend under the reach of his shadows, yet the area remains navigable, a testament to his capacity to enforce order even through the rawest of force. Esdeath, refusing to yield, channels every ounce of Teigu's power, creating walls of ice, cascading shards, and frozen spires designed to challenge and contain the Shadow Monarch. Each structure rises like a monument to her skill and determination, yet Jin-Woo's shadows flow around them effortlessly, adapting instantaneously. They do not strike recklessly. They do not overcommit. Every action is deliberate, neutralizing the threat while preserving the battlefield as a controlled space. Esdeath feels for the first time the overwhelming weight of being challenged by an entity whose reach and intelligence exceed even her formidable expectations. Jenda signals Night Raid to maintain distance. Their survival depended on observation and discretion rather than confrontation. Civilians who survived the chaos emerged from hiding, their eyes wide at the sight of a figure commanding shadows with a precision that blurs the line between reality and something far beyond comprehension. The once feared empire, the sprawling symbol of authority and control, has been broken not by rebellion alone, but by a singular entity whose judgment now dictates the rules. The city, fractured and scarred, bears witness to a new hierarchy, one not defined by titles or loyalty, but by the undeniable force of one sovereign will. Jin-Woo's eyes scan the remnants of the battlefield, lingering on Esdeath as if weighing her continued defiance. His shadows shift subtly, responding to every calculated move she makes, yet they do not strike without purpose. It is a display of absolute control, an assertion of dominance not through rage or brutality, but through measured judgment. Even the Emperor, observing helplessly from the heights of his chamber, begins to comprehend the futility of traditional authority in the presence of such a force. Fear, awe, and desperation ripple through him as the realization takes hold. His empire has fractured not because of strategy, not because of rebellion, but because one being has stepped beyond the constraints of human power and imposed a new order. Esdeath takes a deep breath, ice forming around her like a storm attempting to contain a volcano. She strikes again, faster, sharper, more precise than before, yet each blow is anticipated, countered, or rendered irrelevant by shadows that move in perfect harmony with Jin-Woo's intent. She begins to understand a terrifying truth. Brute strength, strategic genius, and experience, no matter how formidable, are insufficient against a being who does not merely react, but predicts, adapts, and neutralizes with near-omniscient precision. Frustration and exhilaration mix in her gaze as she pushes against the boundaries of her Teigu, testing the limits of both her power and the battlefield itself. Night Raid observes silently, Akame's eyes narrowing as she studies Jin-Woo's patterns. Each shadow movement, each adaptive response, each calculated decision reflects not only immense power, but an intelligence that surpasses conventional understanding. The team realizes that survival and influence in this new order require alignment, patience, and the ability to act within the constraints set by the Shadow Monarch's judgment. They are no longer merely rebels or fighters. They are participants in a living system of power where timing, precision, and understanding dictate outcomes far more than force alone. The city itself reacts. Buildings groan under residual energy, streets crack under the weight of previous collisions, and shards of ice hang suspended mid-air as if frozen in recognition of the new authority present. Civilians who emerge are cautious, observing shadows that move like sentient guardians, understanding that the rules have changed. The capital, once a symbol of human governance and control, now lies under the influence of a force that enforces judgment with unerring precision. Jin-Woo's presence has transformed the battlefield into an ecosystem of power where survival is determined not by numbers or weapons, but by adaptation, alignment, and understanding, the will of a monarch who operates beyond human comprehension. Jin-Woo takes a measured step forward, shadows rippling like ink across water, enveloping the plaza in an aura of undeniable authority. Esdeath braces prepared for continued resistance, yet even she senses the inevitability of his control. Night Raid adjusts their positions, careful not to provoke, careful to respect the unspoken boundaries of a battlefield where conventional rules no longer apply. The Emperor, still observing, feels the crushing weight of irrelevance. His empire, his authority, his ultimate weapon. None can dictate the outcome here. The Shadow Monarch has become the defining force in a broken empire, and the consequences of this judgment will echo far beyond the ruins of the capital, shaping the future of every life within its reach. The plaza falls into a tense rhythm. Shadows twist, ice cracks, and residual energy hums in the air as Jin-Woo asserts dominance not through destruction alone, but through controlled, absolute judgment. Night Raid, Esdeath, and the remnants of Imperial forces recognize the futility of opposing him directly. The battle is no longer a duel of strength or skill. It is a demonstration of sovereignty, strategy, and the imposition of will at a scale that surpasses every expectation. The capital has fractured, yes, but from this fracture emerges clarity. The Shadow Monarch is now the axis upon which the fate of the city turns. Jin-Woo's presence dominates the shattered cityscape like a force of nature. Shadows ripple outward, flowing into every broken street and alley, expanding with purpose, yet moving with precision that ensures civilians remain untouched. His observation is meticulous, his judgment exact. Even Esdeath, whose ice has reshaped large portions of the plaza in desperate counterattacks, finds her movements anticipated before they can be fully executed. Every spike of ice, every barrier she raises, is met with subtle adjustments from Jin-Woo's shadows, neutralized or redirected in a way that asserts dominance without unnecessary destruction. He is not a mindless destroyer. He is a sovereign enforcing order through sheer control and unparalleled perception. Night Raid continues to maneuver cautiously, their mission evolving from engagement to survival and adaptation. Akame leads, her instincts honed from years of rebellion, ensuring her team avoids provoking Jin-Woo's shadows while still remaining in positions to observe and respond. Tatsumi mirrors her movements, reading the battlefield with heightened awareness, anticipating not only potential debris from the residual effects of the Emperor's Teigu, but also the precise calculations of the Shadow Monarch's influence. Leone remains on the periphery, ready to intercept any threat, her muscles coiled in preparation, yet restrained by the unspoken understanding that missteps could provoke a level of force beyond their ability to survive. Above the plaza, Esdeath channels every ounce of Teigu's capability, unleashing waves of ice and shards that slice through the air like deadly lightning. She is a storm, relentless and terrifying, yet each attack is subtly absorbed or circumvented by the shadows. Jin-Woo does not attack with rage. He counters with a cold, calculated efficiency, neutralizing threats without overextending. His mastery of shadow allows him to turn even the most precise attacks into harmless expressions of potential energy, a silent but absolute demonstration that he dictates the rules of engagement. The Emperor's position grows increasingly desperate. From his vantage, he watches the city tremble under the residual energies of both his Teigu and the conflict above the plaza. His ultimate weapon, once thought capable of asserting control, now lies impotent in the face of an opponent whose power cannot be measured by conventional metrics. Fear courses through him as he realizes that authority alone, even when backed by destructive artifacts and elite forces, is insufficient to challenge the Shadow Monarch. His empire is crumbling not because of rebellion, not because of failure in strategy, but because one entity has redefined the parameters of power and judgment. Civilians tentatively step from hiding, their eyes wide with awe and terror. The streets, once filled with order and control, now exist under the silent authority of a force that enforces balance without intervention unless necessary. Shadows ripple around them, but no harm comes to those who remain passive. Night Raid notes this, understanding that the battlefield has become a space where restraint and control govern the survival of all within it. They move with care, recognizing that even the slightest provocation could invoke judgment, and survival demands precision, patience, and respect for the unseen rules dictated by Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo's shadows begin to consolidate, flowing together in patterns that both protect and assert dominance over the plaza. Esdeath, despite her relentless assault, is forced onto the defensive, realizing that her raw power, her strategic brilliance, and even her Teigu cannot overwhelm the adaptive intelligence of the Shadow Monarch. She pivots, strikes, and redirects constantly. Yet with every movement, the lesson becomes clearer. Dominance in this new order is not achieved through brute force alone, but through calculation, adaptability, and the ability to exist within a system governed by one will that sees all. Night Raid exchanges tense glances, Akame's expression unreadable but sharp with awareness. The team comprehends the full scale of the new reality. Their rebellion, their experience, their skills, all pale in comparison to a force that operates beyond conventional understanding. The balance of the battlefield is dictated by the Shadow Monarch's judgment, and while they can move, observe, and influence to a degree, they are no longer masters of the environment. They are participants navigating a system of power that enforces absolute control. The Emperor's desperation mounts. He attempts to issue new commands to remaining troops, ordering counterattacks, strategic repositioning, and renewed deployment of Teigu forces, but his directives are rendered ineffective. The Shadow Monarch anticipates, adapts, and nullifies with an efficiency that leaves no margin for error. Fear replaces authority in the Emperor's heart. The realization that he cannot command the battlefield, that his power is irrelevant in the presence of this singular entity, begins to reshape his understanding of dominance, control, and survival. Esdeath, sensing the futility of her current approach, adjusts strategy. She begins to test Jin-Woo's reactions not with brute force, but with calculated deviations, attempting to identify limits in his adaptability. Shadows ripple, coiling and retreating only to return with refined precision. Each test is met with awareness, and each deviation fails to break the rhythm of his control. She realizes that she is engaged not merely in combat, but in an encounter with judgment incarnate, a force that enforces a hierarchy based on understanding, perception, and unparalleled strategic insight rather than brute strength alone. The plaza, fractured and scarred, becomes a stage for the assertion of absolute authority. Shadows ripple across streets, ice fractures and reforms, and the remnants of the Emperor's Teigu pulse faintly with residual energy. Civilians and combatants alike recognize that the rules of engagement have fundamentally shifted. Night Raid moves with care, aware that their survival depends on their ability to read, adapt, and respect the judgment imposed by Jin-Woo's presence. As death braces, testing, probing, and pushing against limits that continue to recede before her. The Emperor watches, powerless to influence the outcome, as the Shadow Monarch solidifies his control over a broken empire and a shattered cityscape. Jin-Woo steps forward, shadows flowing with deliberate grace. Every motion is a demonstration of calculated dominance, a silent decree that the battlefield, once a chaotic space of conflicting wills, is now governed by a single authority. The Shadow Monarch does not annihilate indiscriminately. He enforces balance, evaluates potential threats, and asserts control with absolute precision. Even the most formidable forces, from elite soldiers to Esdeath herself, must yield to the reality of a new hierarchy. Night Raid watches in tense respect, understanding that the capital's fate, their survival, and the order of this broken empire are now dictated by a force that exists beyond comprehension, whose judgment is absolute and whose reach reshapes the rules of power entirely. The plaza lies in uneasy silence, fractured streets glimmering under the remnants of frost and shadow, the echoes of destructive energy slowly fading. Jin-Woo's figure stands at the center, shadows stretching outward like living extensions of his will, each tendril pulsating with precise awareness and intent. He does not move recklessly. He does not strike unnecessarily. His presence alone asserts dominion. Every movement is measured, every ripple of shadow a silent judgment that reinforces his supremacy over the shattered battlefield. Even Esdeath, exhausted and strained from her relentless attempts to challenge him, recognizes the futility of conventional assault. Each ice strike she hurls is intercepted, absorbed or subtly deflected, leaving her to realize that she is no longer fighting an opponent, but a sovereign whose reach and intelligence exceed mortal comprehension. Night Raid watches cautiously, Akame's sharp gaze scanning every shadow and fissure in the plaza. Tatsumi and Leon flank her, prepared to act in an instant, yet constrained by the unspoken rule of observation. Najenda coordinates from a distance, her mind racing through contingencies, understanding that survival here is no longer determined by skill or speed, but by alignment, awareness, and the ability to operate within the invisible boundaries imposed by Jin-Woo's presence. The team moves with careful deliberation, threading through the ruins while keeping a respectful distance from the Shadow Monarch, fully aware that even the slightest provocation could bring absolute judgment upon them. Esdeath steadies herself, forcing her breathing into a measured rhythm as she reassesses the battlefield. Her mind races through every possible tactic, every hidden angle, every opportunity to exploit a weakness. Yet as she studies Jin-Woo's calm, unyielding posture and the fluid, adaptive movements of his shadows, she realizes that the traditional dynamics of combat no longer apply. She is confronting an entity that operates beyond reaction, beyond prediction, a being whose understanding of the battlefield surpasses her most complex calculations. Her ice begins to shimmer, more as a defensive posture than offense, a testament to the recognition of supremacy. The Emperor, still observing from the palace, grips the gilded railing with trembling hands. His trump card, the weapon meant to reassert control and crush rebellion, lies neutralized in effect, its catastrophic energy dissipated or redirected with perfect efficiency by the Shadow Monarch. The city, his authority, his meticulously planned strategies, all of it crumbles under a presence he cannot control or anticipate. Desperation and awe war within him as he finally comprehends that power in its rawest form is meaningless without the precision, judgment, and adaptability exemplified by Jin-Woo. The capital has fractured, but from this ruin emerges a force that redefines hierarchy, authority, and survival itself. Jin-Woo surveys the remnants of the battlefield. Civilians cautiously emerge from hiding, and even Night Raid senses the subtle shift in balance. Destruction exists, yes, but the casualties are far fewer than anticipated. The Shadow Monarch has not ruled through terror alone. His presence enforces order with calculated restraint, protecting innocence and minimizing unnecessary suffering. The broken city is a testament not just to his power, but to the disciplined intelligence with which he applies it. Shadows coil around him, responding instantly to residual threats, yet leaving space for allies, observers, and innocents to navigate safely. Esdeath lowers her arms slightly, ice dissipating with a hiss, acknowledging, though silently, the absolute reality of Jin-Woo's control. Night Raid observes the moment, recognizing that the battle is over, not through victory or defeat in traditional terms, but through a display of unassailable authority. The Emperor's forces are scattered, Teigu's ultimate destructive potential nullified, and the capital now stands under the unchallenged oversight of a force beyond mortal reckoning. Jin-Woo has emerged not as a conqueror in the traditional sense, but as the monarch of a broken empire, whose judgment dictates survival, order, and consequence. In the aftermath, the city breathes cautiously. Shadows retract slightly, coiling closer to Jin-Woo, as if to mark territory and reinforce control. Night Raid positions themselves strategically, observing, aware that their survival hinges on respect, precision, and continued alignment with the new reality of authority imposed by the Shadow Monarch. Esdeath, though unwilling to admit it fully, acknowledges the dominance before her, her pride tempered by the understanding that she has encountered a force unlike any she has ever faced. The Emperor is left to confront the collapse of his illusions of control, forced to reckon with a new hierarchy that defies conventional governance and human authority. Jin-Woo's gaze sweeps the broken streets one final time, shadows rippling as if breathing with sentient awareness. He does not gloat. He does not revel. He simply stands as the axis upon which the shattered capital now pivots, a monarch defined not by crown or title, but by absolute presence, judgment, and calculated dominance. Night, Raid, Esdeath, and even the remnants of the Imperial forces are left to navigate this new order, understanding instinctively that survival, influence, and the future of the city depend entirely on their ability to respect, observe, and act within the boundaries established by a force beyond comprehension. The city remains fractured, but in the fracture lies clarity. A new balance has been imposed, one where power is measured not in numbers, weapons, or strategy alone, but in perception, adaptability, and the enforcement of absolute judgment. Jin-Woo has become the sovereign of this broken empire, a living embodiment of authority beyond contest. Shadows ripple once more, extending across the ruined streets as silent sentinels, and the survivors, rebels, soldiers, and civilians alike, understand that their fate is now intertwined with the presence of a being who defines the rules of survival, consequence, and order. As the dust settles and the hum of residual energy fades, Night Raid exchanges a brief glance, silent acknowledgement passing among them. Akame tightens her grip on her blade, Tatsumi adjusts his stance, and Leone remains poised for any sudden threat, yet there is an unspoken recognition. The battlefield has changed irreversibly. Esdeath finally withdraws slightly, ice retracting, and even the Emperor retreats into the shadow of his own shattered authority, the magnitude of what has transpired dawning fully upon him. Jin-Woo steps forward once, shadows coiling to respond to subtle threats, then falls still. The plaza, scarred and shattered, becomes a monument to his judgment, a visual testament to the arrival of a monarch whose dominion extends beyond rebellion, beyond loyalty, and beyond mortal comprehension. The capital may be broken, but in that brokenness, a new order stands unchallenged. And with that, the story of this encounter comes to a close, leaving the city, its survivors, and all who dared challenge its fate forever changed under the shadow of the Shadow Monarch. This has been LoreCity. If you enjoyed witnessing the Shadow Monarch reshape an empire, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more multiverse battles where power, strategy, and consequence collide. Drop a comment telling us which universe you want to see next and how you think Jin-Woo would handle it. The multiverse awaits.